Watching Netflix in the bath, self-care or just hiding in the bubbles? That's what we're talking about today on Cure the Calm. I am one of your hosts, Paul Scott, here in Nashville, realtor and musician, along with my co-host, Dr. Vivek Gupta, all the way out in Los Angeles. He is the CEO and founder of mindfulwellness.com. How are we doing out there today?
What's up, everyone? Welcome from cloudy Los Angeles. Yeah, it's a little
Cloudy.
bit
You
different.
guys have clouds out there? I
I
thought it
know
was just fall.
it's just like a weird, yeah. That's a joke from the '80s. Come on, all right, Arizona.
Okay. All right. All right.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about, Netflix, and honestly, I've never watched Netflix in a bath, but
Well, I mean, the good thing about this episode, the wellness goes for everybody. Maybe the ladies are out there enjoying their Netflix in the bath, and the guys are doing Netflix and not Netflix and chill, but Netflix and grill. That's what I
yeah,
like to do. I actually have a little
that's
ledge on my
nice.
window of my house that my phone sits on
Yeah,
while I'm Netflix and grill instead of
I
Netflix
love
and
it.
chill. But
Yeah, I love it. So today we're going to talk about self-soothing versus self-care, right? So
okay,
soothing is like regulation, right? So it's when we're all stressed out and everything, and it's kind of escape a little bit, but it could be like, doom scrolling, food, wine, zoning out, anything, right? Versus self-care, which is more restoration. And I think the key point is there's not any judgment on any of these things. They're both necessary. They're both things we got to do. But often, in our modern culture of like self care culture and capitalism and marketing and everything, so much of everything becomes, escape, right? And that's what we substitute for what is actually more experiences that we need is actually calm, restoration, like decreasing our sympathetic system.
so bourbon does that for me sometimes,
Yeah.
and it's that escape. It's so funny. So like, you know, I might have a long day or whatever, and just crave different bourbons, and it's funny. And when we have, for those of us bourbon enthusiasts out there, what happens is, I don't drink much of it at all, like at a time, but what it is when you collect a few different ones and they each have a little bit of this recipe or that recipe going on for that, I can be really crazy at the time, but then one little sip of something at a good proof and a good recipe, without naming names of and going into all of that and what that whole culture is, but it's a little bit of a mind reset for a second.
Yeah.
Now, is it good if I'm drinking half a bottle of every? No, that's not what it needs to be about, right? But it's a snippet or a taste or your chocolate chip cookie or something like that, of, but we think it's craving the bourbon or craving the chocolate chip cookie. Sorry, I can't talk. But what we're actually, are you saying what we're actually craving is an escape and a mindset reset? Is that kind of why we're triggered to go to those certain things, whatever your vice is?
I mean, I think you bring up like an important point that it's not like the thing, it's our intentionality behind the thing, right? And how we
Right.
use it and everything, right? So, like a sip of bourbon, and it's like very thoughtful, right? In terms of it. I think that is beautiful, right? That's a nice experience. And of course, it's a difference between like our dopamine pathway, reward pathway, and needing right the bourbon at night every night, right, to go to sleep, to relax, like to go away from stress, right? And I think it's about how often and what we're doing. And again, like I think it's really important with everything not to, like there's so much judgment put on everything, right? Even
Sure.
the word like alcoholic or like all that, right? Like I
Oh,
said
really?
my patients, like those words I feel like often are not helpful, right? Because I think it's just like that shame and guilt and makes us just not want to. So many people like don't want to deal with it because of this, right? In my clinic, we treat a lot of people with coexisting, food and alcohol or other substances. And it's just like when we're willing to kind of take the shame and guilt off people, it's just much easier to deal with, right? But that's kind of a little bit of a tangent. But I think that like, the difference we're trying to make is like the self-soothing, which again is necessary at time, which the bourbon, even in like the healthiest ways as you're talking about, could fall into, versus self-care, which is restoration, which is things that our body needs, like sleep, right? Like these are just fundamental rules of how the body works, like
Well,
sleep.
and I think that that's something, even on my time on the road, I experienced myself, other people, whatever. There's a routine. So no matter where you work or what you do, there's routines that you fall into. And I think it's so much easier to grab the self-soothing
Yeah,
thing first that I don't ever end up creating self-care restoration. So
yeah,
my escapes or my feel goods or my whatever it is to change up my routine in my day is automated and becomes programmed and becomes daily and habitual. And if that is something like alcohol for some folks, we're basing our escapes on the regulation, not the restoration. So
yes,
how do we shift that mindset out of regulation? Not that like you said, it's not like we're shaming or saying the
yeah,
regulation things are bad, but how do we get a better focus from regulation to restoration? For me, what instantly just popped in my head is the FDA's food chart for how we should be 75% carbohydrates,
yeah,
right? And
that's a
uh,
big deal.
and
Yeah,
and very little protein and all of those things for decades.
yeah,
That's what we were told to do.
yeah. You should eat like
And
5 loaves of bread every day. Yeah,
yeah, 5 loaves of bread every day is what you should do, and you'll be fine. So clearly, there's lots of misinformation out there, whether
yeah,
it be from a government source, whether it be from tons of what we talk about here is cutting through the noise in wellness. Everyone's a guru.
yeah.
So yeah, anyway, just how can we shift the needle or change the pie graph to having more restoration than regulation in our lives?
I mean, I think it's centering it on ourselves, right? I mean, the government has updated their recommendations. Like
I
it's
know. I just had to pick on him.
yeah.
Hey, I think RFK did that, right? Didn't he put out the most recent? Finally, we have the right food charts out.
I don't think he put out any food charts. Like I'll have to look at it back.
I
Well,
know.
we need an
I
episode.
love that you don't like him, and I do.
Yeah, I know. I want an episode all on RFK. We'll do that like in
Yeah,
our
the whole RFK.
episode. Yeah, but I think it's just again like centering it on what is productive in our lives and looking at our lives from this compassionate place, right? Like for me, for instance, like I was finding myself like really going on the Instagram and not Instagram, but like X and Substack and what are the other ones? I don't know. Those are the main in social media platforms that I kept going on, and it was just like so damaging for my brain. I mean, I'm actually really pretty skeptical of social media in general. I don't know if that can be restorative in any way, but I've actually got an app that banned all social media on all my devices, and my brain just feels looser, right? Like I'm still obsessed with the news and politics and everything, but I just don't like look at social media. I prevented myself, and I found that act to be very restorative, right? Or just like at least not succumbing to that type of escape, and which I don't think was helpful in any way. And I think that just seeing our minds, like how they're working, right? Like, I think you gave the perfect example is just like, if it's if it's like, okay, like you have this, a few sips of bourbon and you're thinking about it and all of this, like, I think that's a really optimal way of self-soothing versus if it's that, like again, as we talked about, coming home every night and doing that, or for me looking on my phone every night, like, or looking at it throughout the day, or sometimes when I was driving or
Or
something.
people just listening to Cuethecalm all the time because they know it's the best thing to watch and listen to. No,
No, this is very restorative, so
right, yes, that we're trying to bring more restoration to your life.
yeah,
What's interesting about that as well is, when you go to your regulation things and you've got those working out for you, the problem with regulation over restoration is that, like so many things in this culture, there's never enough regulation. You keep having to add to it. That one, now you need two. That it doesn't, or a different version of. It's a search that never ends,
Yes.
where I finally got some good sleep last night, even though I had to wake up super early today for a meeting with someone in Poland. But
Yeah.
it was so funny, even though I woke up earlier today in order to do that meeting, I was, made sure that I got enough sleep because I was going to have to be on
Yeah.
camera very early. And it's like, wow, okay, sleep actually works. That was very restorative. You know what I mean? And but that also goes along with, I had to set a boundary for
Yes.
how to achieve that restoration that I knew I would need.
Yeah,
Um,
as we're talking about it, I like the idea of those boundaries, right? Because that actually gives us like maybe I'd use a different like structure, right?
okay,
Like structure in our lives to help us, right? So restoration could be like more of the structural elements we build into our lives. I think there's ways to achieve that structure. I think we have an episode coming up about perfectionism, and I think we'll save that to that episode because I think
okay.
the way to
Well,
build
give
that.
me one tip
Yeah.
on one awesome way that we can start to introduce a piece of structure. Because look, I'm a realtor. My schedule's all over the place for a lot of the time. I do have structure. I do time blocking, that sort of thing. We can talk about perfectionism for that part.
Yeah.
But however, I'm a creative. Musician is where the majority of my life has been placed, and the word structure sounds like ooey gooey stuff. It reminds me of my girls making slime at the kitchen counter, and all I can see is that they're using glue and my
Yeah.
wife's favorite soap,
Yeah.
and all of these things are just, while I'm in charge of watching everybody, all her, like,
You're gonna get shit for the self,
oh,
right?
100%. Like, where did the Bath and Body Works go
Yeah.
that,
You're
I
waiting
just
for the
got?
comment to come,
Oh,
you
it's
know?
over
Yeah.
there in the slime that's now dripped on the chair, on their
Yeah.
clothes, and on the floor.
Yeah.
And that's all I can see, and all they
Yeah.
can see and feel is the beautiful slime that they've made,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So structure's not always been my best friend, particularly trying to introduce it to make change if it's actually for the purpose of adding restoration over my regulations that are easy. I like those easy self-soothing things. Now I got to have self-care. It just seems challenging to do the self-care, and then I got to put up boundaries or structure to even make it happen. It just kind of seems like a turn off. So how do I turn on, how can we make that a turn on for someone who's not particularly structured?
I mean, the thing is, like, the word boundary to me is actually, it feels like that, right? Like, it
Okay.
feels like, because I don't
Like a
know.
fence, right? Your
Yeah,
day.
it feels like
No
a
offense
fence,
again.
and I
Very
hate that.
comfortable.
Yeah, I absolutely hate, I don't know, it's very psychological. Like, I hate being, like, told what to do or captured or, like, so I hate that word too. Structure feels a little better. I mean, it's all semantics, but, like, I think what I've learned, I'm learning and I continue to learn, is that, this structure allows us to have more space, right? You create this kind of boundaries, or, you create these maps, maybe is a better way to say it, right? To help us kind of navigate so that within that line, we have way more freedom. And it just kind of allows our bodies to just heal and be at our best, right? So I think what we'll talk about in another episode is just go slow, right? And I think perfectionism is the biggest destruction for that, right? We think we got to, like, I'm going to go from 0 to 60. I'm going to start, like, sleeping 8 hours every night. I'm going to get up. I'm going to work out. I'm going to not eat that cookie or, like, the pancake or the breakfast burrito. And I'm just going to do it, and it's going to be done. And it's going to be for the next 70 years, I'm going to live like this, right? Like, that
Right.
shit never works. And it's just about going slow. I think
It
that's the biggest key.
totally. I think, when we're looking at, the key is intention and outcome, right? We want the outcome, but we don't necessarily do the things that it takes in the structure to get the desired outcome. A lot of that has to do with our cultural influence. How marketing has blurred the line between caring and consuming. Why
Yes.
treat yourself culture often encourages, quick relief and non-long-term health,
Yeah.
and so it's like, are we performing care, or are we actually feeling cared for, are some of the
Yeah.
questions that just come
That's good.
out there.
Yeah.
So, like, can you
But
touch a
I
little?
think
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, you go.
I was just gonna say, can you talk a little bit about, when soothing becomes about avoidance?
Yeah, so I think that's kind of what I was going to too. Like, I mean, first of all, I think again, just I want to harp on this because I think that this dichotomy or dualism, I think can, perhaps in some listeners or in our minds can be like one is better than the other. And we do need like all of this, right? I think that when self-soothing becomes avoidance is when we're just running away from the present moment. And our minds are so, sometimes in my meditation and mindfulness, like, I just kind of can see it. I can't hold on to this like a lot, still a work in progress. But I think that so much, it's just like it always feels as like we're trying to run away from the pain and towards the pleasure. And it feels like everything else is just window dressing on that back. It's like that's all we're trying to do. And I think that has to do with like when this self-soothing becomes like not dealing with the emails or not dealing with your marriage or not dealing with your kids or your business or whatever, sorry, these I'm probably revealing a lot in those
No,
words I
you're
use.
good.
Yeah. But I think that all of these things, like when, we're just binge watching something to not deal with things, right? Like that becomes an avoidant thing. But I think again, like sometimes we need to disconnect it like that, right? Sometimes we need to like take space. I think in MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, we always talk about like, dipping your toe in, like practicing self-care, right? Like when we're facing a hard thing, let's start a little bit and then come back, right? And a little bit more and come back, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the approach to this. So it's not like, again, hustle culture, like, oh, you should be dealing with this. Why are you doing this? It's like, no, like practice some self-compassion and love and start doing things slowly.
Well, and I think you brought up a good point too. Obviously, we're on social media with this. We're on a YouTube platform for this, and
Yeah.
yet it is so often that the phones and the scrolling and things like this become the focus of so much of that life. You brought up an interesting point that how many people will use a show, an episode, myself included. I'm guilty of this. It's like
Sure.
if it's late at night, my wife and I might put a show on and watch it together just because we're tired, but we want to bond, but we also don't feel like really talking about
Yeah.
anything else other than the show because we
Yeah.
just kind of want to hang out together.
Yeah.
But we're really probably it'll give us maybe a storyline to talk about tomorrow about what we watched or something like that. But I think it's very easy in this culture to replace relationship with a device in a way, or something to do, or somewhere to go. And not that you shouldn't experience things and hang out and
Yeah.
binge watch with each other and all that sort of stuff. You just can't let it replace what it is that you're trying to build. And I think part of what you talked about was the pain and the pleasure, right?
Yeah.
Relationships take work and conversations to make happen. If I'm at the gym, I know that there's going to have to be reps that are involved to get the
Yeah.
desired result. And oh, by the way, one set's not good enough. I've got to go back and do multiple sets of the pain
Yeah.
that I just experienced to then get the result. Oh, and then even when I'm back at home after I've left the place where the pain happened, I got to come home and repair that with the proper protein, proper
Yeah.
food,
And rest.
and yeah, and then rest. And I'm so glad you brought that up because I think rest is one of the biggest missing things. But it's funny, it's talked about a lot. We talk a lot about rest, but we don't do a lot of rest in
Yeah.
in our culture. And Apple just came out with not just, I guess it's been the last Apple 9 watch and the Apple 10 watch that's out now. They actually have a sleep apnea detection on there, and
Yeah.
that tells us a couple things. Not just that the technology is capable of it, but it's at least enough of a conversation, and it's also enough of there's enough people out there for them to actually develop technology to go towards that. Now, whether you believe it's true and if it works and all that, I don't. That's not even what I'm talking about. My thing is with it, I know that when I have had a week that's just worn me out, and I've averaged like
Yeah.
4 or 5 hours sleep. Just happened 2 nights ago because I just had one of those weeks.
And me
My
too.
wife elbowed me and she's like, "Hey, wake up! You're snoring." I'm not
Yeah.
typically a snorer, except for when I'm really worn out. And when I'm really worn out and that snoring kicks in, I will have a couple times a year one of these things where I just really stop breathing in my sleep. And I've never been tested for it. Maybe I need to. We can talk offline about whether I need to
talk about that. we can talk about sleep apnea, which is very dangerous for everybody. I mean, people need to do the CPAPs. I think the Apple Watch is probably pretty good if they've released it. Apple's, obviously.
Right. But I'm like, I know in my own life that like it's the big difference between me being able to perform at a 6 a.m. Zoom and not being able to breathe in the middle of the week during the night. So it is really a big deal to talk about. How do you integrate when you're working with clients on their self-care and their mindful wellness? Sleep's not a sexy thing to talk about either, right?
Yeah.
It's not a drug. It's not an injectable. Yeah. It's not a new recipe for including more protein in your diet. Yeah. So how do you get that into the conversation as part of your wellness plan, that sleep is just as important as a medication or just as important as a protein?
So, okay. I like a lot, I think we need a separate episode on sleep too. Sleep is definitely, I like how that framing.
Another episode. We're just creating episodes as we're doing this one today.
Yeah, we're just unveiling our process, while we do this episode. But I like a lot of things you said. I like in a relationship how you talked about self-soothing and self-care, right? In the context of a relationship, which is I think it's so brilliant in that it's and I think it's another example how both are needed. You both need the experiences where you zone out and watch Netflix together, and you need experiences where you talk, right? And you talk and you deal with stuff.
That's the whole numbing versus nurturing thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. But both are important. With sleep, it's taken me I advise a lot of my patients on this, and we talk about sleep. We just talked about in the first visit. That's just, I think people now understand sleep is incredibly important. And especially, maybe aging makes you think of that more. I've fought sleep. I've just taken the caffeine and slept 5 hours. And in medicine, we're kind of trained to do that, right? We're trained to we have to do that in residency and everything. And
I love when doctors have the worst diet out of their patients.
Yeah.
And sleep the least out of anyone. Yeah. Don't practice, do what I say, not what I do.
Yeah. Just if we have to work at night because someone has to cover the hospital, it fucks up our sleep a little bit. But I think that's I've just felt it. When you sleep well, it's just you just feel, it's like being high or something. It's being on a drug. You're just when you have good sleep, you're what is this? It just feels different,
Yeah.
But in terms of my patients, again, starting slow. If we want, we could talk in another episode, but really you talk about is it take you a long time to fall asleep, or is it you wake up at night, right? And those are kind of different interventions to those things and how you deal with it and what's going on with stress. Is it on the bathroom in the night? Is it your partner snoring? There's a lot of different things. We kind of brainstorm all of those and try to figure out the way to optimize people's sleep, because us right now, we're primarily dealing with weight. Sleep, irrespective of calories, contributes to weight. And so I think, and of course, sleep apnea is a whole separate thing that we have to, because it can deal with, blood pressure and which can eventually deal with heart attacks and strokes and everything. And so, losing weight really helps with sleep apnea if people have it, but also CPAP. And that helps people lose weight too. So they're all these different ways to deal with it. It's just really important. But I also I liked how you say it's not a thing you take. It's not a thing you do. It's kind of the complete opposite of it. And that's why it's kind of harder, I think, for us, right? It's kind of not in a value.
It's also free. It doesn't cost anything.
Yeah, it's free. Also, you're right.
Endless supply.
You're right. You're right. But it's just, I think our lifestyle is also, again, a structural factor that just messes it all up. You're coming home, right? You're plenty of people, you come home, then you're have to make dinner or take your kids to things. And then you have to put them to sleep and make dinner. And then you hang out. And then it's like literally you only have a few hours before you got to like go to sleep and do it all over again. And people are missing that time of restoration, and taking back to our topic, self-care, like the restoration throughout the day, right? Like I think restoration is like disconnection, right? You need that disconnection, that rest, and we don't have that during the day. And I think this isn't, again, our lifestyle. Like we couldn't create a world and a society and everything that is like makes humans like more unhealthy than we do right now, right?
Well, yeah, it's like, is it care or is it a cop out? You know what I mean? It's like we've got to really make that distinction between ourselves, and I think that that's where self-soothing falls into the cop out versus the self-care. That, and if there's, I've found in working with you that if there's more focus on the self-care than the
Yeah,
self-soothing, then I don't need as much of the self-soothing or the cop outs. And now, instead of like, where it could be a circumstance where that,
yeah,
the bourbon is like, I need that every night. I need this. Oh, I need more, and it
yeah,
just becomes this gluttony of self-soothing, which
yeah,
can turn to other issues,
yeah,
that could be really bad. Um, I can have more self-care, and
yeah,
then maybe on the weekend have a nice self-soothing to
yeah,
reward myself for the self-care of
yeah,
the week, or something like that. You then take control of the self-soothing elements and
yeah,
can add them in when the self-cares become the priority. And it's the opposite.
yeah,
If you only self-soothe and do no restoration
yeah,
and no self-care, you're going to be in this endless circle that just always feels like you're putting patches on everything, band-aids on the problem, so to speak. It's like the boat that you just put, nothing but what's that stuff? Flex Seal, patches on it. Eventually you might want to repair the bottom of the boat.
yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah. Not like band-aids, right? Like not
right,
all.
right, right.
But
So give me, what are some of the things that are out there that are buzzwords? Digital detoxes, canceling plans, charcuterie nights, whatever. I mean, whatever it could be. What are some of the popular things out there that people are debating that can be either, labeled as different types of behaviors and stuff that put some myth busting out there for us on some popular topics, if you don't mind.
yeah, I mean, charcuterie nights sound awesome. I've never done that. That
I
sounds,
actually love that idea. I,
yeah,
I looked up a couple ideas. I'm not going to lie. That
yeah,
wasn't just that I'm so in tune with what's going on out there. I saw that one and had to add it on there. And I was like, hey, that's actually something I probably need to do.
I know.
But
If the
all
Gen
right, so
Zs
we'll
are
both,
doing
we'll
it,
both
that's
put our
awesome.
seal of approval on charcuterie night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I
All
mean,
right, I'm going to
digital,
tell a quick story. I know this is how we run. We're ADD. I don't take any medicine for it because it helps my creativity, right?
yeah,
So, but anyway, my off topic thing here is, wine and charcuterie night. We were on tour out in Napa Valley, and we had the very first time we went there with our bus. We had another show coming up, and we had such a good time at the first winery that we decided to call the venue and go, hey, we are really sorry, we're going to miss sound check, but we're probably going to roll in about an hour right before, and we'll just hit the stage with our equipment and go. Our bus broke down. We didn't tell them that it broke down, quote unquote, in Napa Valley, but
yeah,
we enjoyed the first winery so much that we had to go to another one, right? So as we were doing that, it was interesting. At the end of the day, we got over to Silver Oaks Winery out there, and they had set up a small charcuterie, and they don't have a lot of different wines at first when you go out there and you're just doing the general tasting, right? So we got in there, but it was right before they were about to close, and I don't remember which one of our lead singers said, but he was like, man, we should just hang out here and party after hours after you guys close. And the person who was running the place at that time was like, that sounds like a great idea. So we
wow.
went from their elegant room up front with a couple pieces of charcuterie and a couple different bottles to taste in small little glasses. And then they closed the front door, and then they said, we're gonna take you back to the kitchen. And
Damn.
so if you've ever been to any of the Napa places, they're all gorgeous. The
Yeah, yeah,
tasting rooms, the vineyard. I mean,
yeah.
it is just, it's amazing. But the action is in the kitchens at these wineries. If you guys want a little road trip tip,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
they took us back to the kitchen with all of the staff that was there. They opened up these fridges that just have these
Oh, those
trays
are
of
so
all
neat.
this like expensive cheeses and meats and all this sort of stuff. They're breaking out vintages that they don't even tell people that they have. And
Oh.
we ended up having one of the best wine and charcuterie nights that I've ever had. There you go. Stories from Paul
I mean,
on
that's an
Cuethecalm.
amazing story. Damn, that's a
Yeah.
great.
Anyway, you were going to say a bunch of stuff, and that just came to mind. I had to throw it
No,
out.
I mean, I think that's a good example of just like, if we haven't talked about community, right? Community is healthy, right? Like one thing I always say is people have been like, we have like an 80% not 100 rule where like 100 is actually bad because one of the things people have been doing with food and drink forever is doing it with each other, right? And that sounds like just a beautiful experience. That
Yeah,
is like a healthy experience, right? Like
it really was. And I
yeah,
think what was so cool about that for us, we're experiencing something that you typically don't get to experience, at a winery in
yeah,
Napa.
yeah,
But then what was so cool for the staff there is their day to day is okay, more wine tours, more charcuterie,
yeah,
yada yada. But for them, they got to hang out with a band in their kitchen, and
yeah.
they were like, it's kind of like when people are at your home, you're like, hey man, I got this cool thing I want to
Yeah.
show you,
You're
or
hosting. Humans have been doing that forever,
yeah.
hosting,
So it
right?
turned
Yeah,
into a whole hosting event, and I
yeah,
think that goes, sort of back to what we're talking about. What started out maybe as self-soothing,
yeah,
ended up bringing community to it,
yeah,
and the enjoyment to see the guy who was, the wait staff, who normally doesn't interact very much, or the guy cleaning the dishes and stuff. Everyone was there from every level, all drinking the same wine, eating the
yeah.
same charcuterie, all together, just embracing the time together. If you
That's
asked me which vintages I had, I don't remember. If you were
yeah,
to ask me which meats were on
and you
the
wouldn't remember.
plate, I don't remember, but I
Yeah,
remember the experience that
yeah,
those things brought to the table. And
yeah,
man, it's such a win if we can bring more experience to our life
yeah.
through the self-care with others and involve that in our life versus the self-soothing of just getting the quick fix and band-aid on things.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Just going back to like kind of what you were talking about in terms of like digital detoxes, journaling, canceling plans, like I think those are like, again, it's just like nothing is black or white, right? Nothing is the same for everybody. I do think though, like technology is a thing that is like really deeply, deeply, fundamentally changing what it's like to be a person in the world now. Like I would say it's the food and the phone. And these things are really like really fucking with our moment to moment experience. And I think that digital, like I'm doing a version of a digital detox by banning all social media. And it's just you feel your mind just being freer. Right. And I think that's a really good thing. And honestly, I think in the future, like spirituality is going to revolve around like they'll have activities and exercises like not having your phone, because I think it's just becoming so infiltrated. Like we don't just sit there and think and let our mind wander. The first thing anyone ever does when they're just there is pull out the phone, right? Like that's literally what we do now. And it's just, I think Chris Hayes talks about this. He has a book on attention. A lot of people talk about this, but it's just really, really like changing what it's like to be alive. And I think we still don't understand as a society like how big this is, right? How much of a fundamental shift it is in our day-to-day experience. So I think digital detox is great. That's positive. Canceling plans, I think saying no to things is good, right? Like taking in your bandwidth, I think that's an act of self-care. Journaling is always good, wine and I think all of these wine and charcuterie nights. Yeah, that story you told was amazing. So I think we're for all of those things.
Well, man, I think that's all great. I think that to kind of put a bow on this for today's, podcast, it's like, I think we need to ask the questions: is this caring for me in the moment, or will it help me tomorrow? That's the great thing about self-care versus self-soothing. Self-soothing is very momentary.
Yeah.
Self-care has long-term effects. Everything from what we've talked about, the more the consistency falls into self-care, the more
Yeah.
days in a row that I have good eating habits, the more good days in a row that I couple that with good sleep. If we took even those two things
Yeah.
alone and just said, okay, for the next, I got balloons. I don't know how I do that, but somehow this thing knows that I'm making hand signals and it creates interesting visuals. For those of you that are listening, you have no idea what I'm talking about, but you should by going to Cuethecalm on YouTube, and you can just see
Love
the
it.
balloons
Love the
just
fun.
magically happened on the screen. But no, basically being able to, you know, if I just took 5 days of the week and I said I'm gonna double my protein for 5 days, and I'm gonna commit to sleeping 8 hours for 5 days, and felt the effects of just those two changes, then I'm going to be like, okay, that was actually really awesome. What can I do to even improve upon that? Well, now add, another scoop of vegetables or even a cup of, nuts to, what I'm doing. And then go, there's so many other ways you can do that. I'm going to put, like you said, digital detox. I'm going to put the phone down, and it's getting into nicer weather here. You guys have it out there all the time, deck on it. But, we've got great weather here right now. Like,
Nice.
my poor dog has been pent up for, 4 months because of bad weather and hasn't been on as many walks. I need to go friggin' walk my dog more. That sounds
Yeah.
like such an easy thing or a no-brainer or whatever.
It's nice.
But that can fall into that self-soothing thing too. What we do, we touch on topics. Obviously we give tips and that sort of thing, but for you guys out there listening, if you are interested in moving the needle from self-soothing to self-care, go ahead and comment I want self-care down in the comments of this episode, and Dr. Gupta will have someone reach out from his office directly to you and start getting you set up on a self-care plan that starts with mindful wellness. Of course, it goes
Yeah.
into, tell us real quick, maybe the elevator version of, if someone commented, what are they going to get from you when they hear from you about, mindful wellness, and, kind of an intro into some of the things that you might, be able to get the ball rolling for them from, flipping the needle over.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just getting to know you, right? Like really individualized approach. And like I tell everybody, our goal is to feel people's lives. And then through this way, that's the only way we can come up with interventions that work and try to incorporate more of this self-care in our lives, right? I do want to say, everything's about being slow, being kind of intentional and feeling things, right? Like I do like that experience of what Paul you said, like just try like sleeping, for like 3 days, because our mind, like this is experientially is such a deep way that we learn, and we can go back to that memory like, oh, this is what it felt like, and that is a natural incentive for us to do that, right? So I really like that. But I think incorporating a lot of things that we talked about in the show, we can help with, right now we're focused on weight a lot, but our plans that are to incorporate kind of general kind of wellness and health, and really that incorporates sleep and stress as well as physical activity as well as nutrition. So yeah,
That's awesome. I think, and this might be another episode too. I'm throwing all these episode ideas out. We have so much to talk about.
yeah,
But like, okay, it's May now.
it's man.
And I have 1 month to get bathing suit ready, if you will, right? But you
Yeah,
just said we got to take it slow. And I
yeah,
think that gets back to, if you're the type of person that resets every spring and summer on that, what if you were able to maintain all year long just a wellness that you could easily tweak and get there, rather than, oh, crap, it's May 1st again, and I need to drop 20 pounds in 20 days.
yeah,
There are ways to, that goes back to you've probably been doing more self-soothing than self-care during the year, and you probably have been focusing more on the moments in your life than the tomorrow. So you don't have to wait for a January 1 to make a commitment that you're going to stop in March so that you come up in May and have to lose 20 pounds in 20 days. Start to make these small shifts now, and then what if for the next 5 years you're making tweaks coming into the bathing suit season rather than a complete overhaul that is probably not good for your body. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Gupta, but doing those fast overhauls probably not the best thing for your body.
No, and they're not sustainable. But I think the point is you can start anytime, right? Like it's not like it's kind of liberating, right? And that I think we're these kind of sometimes these mental paradigms that I have to do this by this date or this, they can be destructive, right? Because literally you can do it now. And if you don't do it now, we can forgive ourselves. And now we can do it now. And the next moment, and the next moment. It's all there. In every moment, we can do it, right?
Man, I love that. I think we'll end it with that. In every moment, we can do it. And you have the opportunity to make a change, to cue the calm in your life, by not only staying a part of this show, but let's make some change in some people's lives that's sustainable.
I love it.
Because I whatever you believe, I do believe that we were given our bodies and minds as gifts that were meant to be sustainable. It would be completely pointless for us to be on this earth if it wasn't something that we were meant to be here for. So let's learn how to sustain that in healthy ways and get out of filtering all the noise that's out there and come to a place that kind of wraps it all together and is a champion of who you are and where you want to end up going. Yeah. All right. Well, Dr. Gupta, thank you so much. Always insightful, always compassionate, and we are trying to always just make a difference for some people here out here today. We will see you next time. Oh, we have so much to talk about, but in the meantime, go out there, cue the calm in your life, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.